And welcome to a brand new edition of Face to Face. From tonight, Face to Face will telecast from Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m. all the way till 9 p.m. and will also feature two exciting guests on each episode. And tonight, to begin this Face to Face, we have invited to our studios Swasthika Arulingam, President of the United Federation of Labour. A very good evening, Swasthika, and welcome to Face to Face. And we've also invited attorney Nuwan Bopage to our studios to join us on Face to Face tonight. A very good evening, Mr. Bopage, and welcome to Face to Face. As you all know, tonight we are commemorating the National Labour Day, also known as Mayday. Now, to start off, Swasthika, Mayday is expected to serve as a day of tribute to the working class or the labour force of the country who work tirelessly and who are also the backbone of the country's economy, and we're supposed to commemorate their rights and fight for their rights and appreciate them for all that hard work that they do. But unfortunately in Sri Lanka, May Day has become a day of celebration, and it has also been designed for political parties to further enhance their campaigns. What are your thoughts on this? Where are we going wrong?
In answering your question, I want to touch on the history of May Day because I think it's very relevant to Sri Lanka today. We go 2 centuries back in 1886 in Chicago, Haymarket. There were thousands of workers protesting and striking to fight for an 8-hour workday. Now, the 8-hour workday we enjoy today came as a result of the strike. And just like what happens in Sri Lanka today, when workers were striking, the government sends in police and breaks down that strike. Workers are killed, police officers are killed who are also workers, and a false trial is held against workers and they were hanged as a result. So the reason I am referring to this Haymarket history and the fight of the workers for this 8-hour workday is because today in Sri Lanka, all workers enjoy a 8-hour workday, all permanent workers. And the Labour Minister has brought in a new labour law regulation, new labour law reform. He's proposing a labour law reform which is going to break down this 8-hour workday, and it's going to impose overtime work on workers, or completely demolish this idea of a 8-hour workday which was won through the struggles of workers. So it's very telling that we come rolling back to the same standpoint which happened 2 centuries ago, where today workers are at a point where we have to once again fight for what we have won and what is being taken away from us. And you're right, political parties, particularly mainstream political parties, are using May Day to show their party power instead of working towards workers. But what several unions are doing, several trade unions are doing, and workers' movements and mass movements are doing this May Day is coming to the streets in thousands, and reclaiming what May Day is supposed to be, which is fighting for the rights of workers, fighting for the protection of workers, and not only workers as in blue-collar workers, but what we call working people, the farmers and the fishers whom this country's food security relies on, whose resources are being taken away by the Sri Lankan government today. So it's going to be a culmination of workers, of farmers, of fishers who are going to come to Colombo tomorrow and in various other places also, and they're going to fight for it. And what I would urge mainstream political parties, particularly parties who are sitting in parliament, is that since the end of the Aragalia, the government has been proposing many policies and regulations and laws which have been anti-working people. And these parties have done nothing in parliament. So what is the response and what is the answer you're going to give to the working people on May Day? And what are you going to tell workers? For the last 2 years, you have not done anything in parliament. So today, tomorrow, what are you going to tell workers is the question we as trade unions are asking mainstream political parties.
No, and since you're also attached to a political party, the Frontline Socialist Party, and your party has been very vocal when it comes to fighting for rights. What do you think we're lacking as Sri Lanka when it comes to protection of workers' rights?
Yeah, actually, initial question also a very pivotal question. Now tomorrow actually United National Party also going to celebrate the Workers' Day, and the Podujana Peramuna also going to celebrate that. The same two parties get together in the parliament, actually they are drafting a bill repealing all the other laws that favorable to workers. For example, Termination of Employment Act, Trade Union Act, repealing all these acts, they are going to bring a one law curtailing all the rights that enjoyed by the workers in the country. So same two parties celebrating Workers' Day. So it's a mockery. It's a mockery. So as you question now, in fact, in the world history and when we scientifically analyze the world, the only scientific division of the people is the working class, and those who are exploiting them, politically we call them capitalist class. So these are the two classes that we can identify in the world scientifically. In worldwide, there are around 3.5 billion workers. When it comes to Sri Lanka, there are around 8.5 million workers. These workers only make the history. They are, through their labor only, the entire world moving forward. So at the same time, when we consider about the lifestyle, the condition of these workers, they are living in a very pathetic situation, facing severe consequences. Even during the economic crisis, all the burden ultimately goes to these workers. So where we went wrong from the very inception of the world history, even in 17th century, after the Industrial Revolution, this working class was so enhanced, but they didn't have any ideological weapon to organize. Then the Communist Manifesto came forward. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels prepared that. After that, all these working class got an ideological weapon to organize. So even in the Communist Manifesto, what they invited for, workers unite. Actually, what we are lack of, this unity of the workers, as you correctly pointed out, the unity, it's very difficult to bring them to unity because they have been very strategically divided into political parties and various other ideologies. For example, the workers are concerned the religious things, race, these kind of capitalist ideologies also very tactfully brought forward to divide the workers. So I think what we are lack of, this unity of the workers.
I'd also like to ask you now, we will see many celebrations each and every year when it comes to Mayday from every party. There will be big rallies with tons of people who will come in buses, and there will be big speeches, big promises given to the people on those mass meetings. But what are these parties doing to actually protect the rights of these labourers or for the betterment of the labour force of Sri Lanka?
Yeah, of course. Now, when it comes to the economy, the estate workers are concerned, and the workers who are in the apparel sector is concerned, and other main sectors are concerned. Through the labor of these workers only our economy runs. But the problem is the 5% of the society enjoying around 65% of the economy. So that's the actual issue. Because of this social disparity, only the people are suffering. So whatever clarification, whatever argument you can bring forward, but scientifically, we all are facing this issue because of this social disparities. Only people are suffering. The problem is that 5% only controlling the political arena of the country. Because when you go to the parliament, there are no representatives from the farmers. But at the same time, the lot of representatives are from the part of the those who exploiting the farmers. There are no representative from the student wing, but there are people in the parliament who exploiting these sectors. So therefore, the parliament is concerned. Of course, that so-called representative democracy is totally favorable to people who exploiting the workers. So as long as this so-called existing system is there, actually workers couldn't get anything out of that. So that's a reflection of these Mayday rallies as well. For example, the United National Party, Podujana Peramul, they are actually organizing this just to show the power. They are targeting the next election. But workers are concerned, what are the actual issues that they are facing? These IMF conditions, at the same time these new labor law reforms and Indian intervention. Because of these policies, the next 2-3 years will be very challenging years for workers, because ultimately all the working conditions will get, at the same time their rights will be drastically curtailed. When you go to the Europe and other countries, already they don't have any rights as far as the workers are concerned. Sri Lanka, luckily, due to the Cold War period, due to the fights of the left wing of the country, actually there are certain laws very favorable to the workers. Now they are going to repeal all these laws as well. So next 2-3 years are very challenging the workers are concerned. But these political parties, they are not addressing all these things, as Swasthika said, even inside the parliament, outside the parliament. Actually, that 5% who controlling the entire economy, who exploiting, actually who are the oppressors, only controlling these parties. So as long as the workers get the power of these institutions, toppling these capitalist institutions, there won't be a change.
Swasthika, I'd like to ask you, as a trade unionist, are you satisfied with the promises that are given on these stages, or rather any of these manifestos that are being presented by the mainstream political parties? Are they doing enough for the workforce or the labour force in Sri Lanka?
I think we can understand the position of the mainstream political parties by just watching them and what they are doing in parliament. Last year, there was a law which was passed in parliament stealing the EPF savings, the only savings which most workers have, under the guise of domestic debt restructuring. And the Labour Minister is now proposing a single employment act. Now we take the privileges, the workers, when we say workers, we often think of blue collar workers, but office workers, corporate workers. We take certain things which we have for granted, the 8-hour workday, maternity protection, right to unionize, overtime, the right to overtime pay. These are not just simple things which were handed to us in a golden platter. These were fought and won by workers on many sacrifices. So all of this is going to be wholesale repealed under the new Employment Act, and that is being brought by the current government. Look at the privatization policy of government. How is our state funding welfare, very essential welfare like health and education? Even the IMF is saying that the allocation for health and education is low in Sri Lanka. IMF, which usually proposes wholesale privatization, is saying Sri Lanka is spending less on healthcare. Even the IMF is saying that. But our government has today proposed a policy, a new educational policy, which is going to completely demolish and destroy free education, which is what workers were relying on, particularly workers who are running the economy of this country, the plantation workers, the migrant workers, the garment sector workers, without whom this country will not be able to run one day. So no amount of mega speeches on Mayday is going to change the fact that since the end of the Aragal, the government and mainstream political parties have gotten together and completely dispossessed workers and the rights which working people have fought and won in the last several decades in Sri Lanka. So that is what is telling that no matter what they come and say tomorrow, what they give to workers or what they are promising to workers is already apparent in their conduct in parliament. So it's very obvious for us. Things are not going to get better after the Mayday. So what we as trade unions, and particularly non-party affiliated trade unions, what we are doing is we are gearing for a fight, not only to protect what we already have, but also to propose and to pressure the state to become a state which is favorable to the people who are earning the wealth of this country. And it's not a radical concept when we say the people who earn the wealth of this country must own the wealth. If I work and earn the wealth for this country, I should own it. I should not be dispossessed. That should not be a radical concept. And that is what I think trade unions will be fighting for and pledging to fight for in this 2024 Mayday.
So are you saying that none of the governments who have been there in the past have done justice to playing the role of promoting labour rights, or rather protecting labour rights? Are you saying that all the previous governments have failed in playing that role?
Let me give a very concrete example to answer your question. In the Constitution of Sri Lanka, the only freedom of association which is specifically mentioned is the right to form and join a trade union. We have the Industrial Disputes Act, which protect the right to form and join a trade union. We have a trade union ordinance which creates the structures of trade unions. But today, the entire workforce, less than 9% of the workforce is unionized. Now we ask employers, or if we ask the government, or if we ask, a general public, they would say, no, trade unions are politicized. That is why workers are not joining trade union. But we know when we speak to workers, particularly in the export processing zones, the workers would tell us the single most reason why we are not joining the trade union is because if we join a trade union, we will be dismissed from work. Now it's ironical that the law says one thing, the law protects your right to join a trade union, but on the ground, the law is broken with so much impunity, without a single employer to date being held accountable for workers being dismissed from work from joining the trade union. And what has the government done? We have a very weak industrial disputes policy in the Industrial Disputes Act. When a worker is fired from work for joining a trade union, the case will drag on, the Labour Department will drag on, the Labour Department will not file proper cases. So did the state support any worker to date from 1990, since the general strike? Has the state supported a single worker to join a trade union? And the simple answer is no. So since the open market economy, trade unions was an essential structure of an open market economy to protect the right of workers, particularly to protect the right of women workers, protecting them from sexual harassment, exploitation. And the state has failed to do that. I can give another example. To date in Sri Lanka, we do not have a workplace harassment law. Every single day, women workers are harassed in the factory floor. Women workers are harassed when they go as migrant workers. Women workers are harassed in plantation. Has any government done anything? To date, we don't have a workplace harassment law in Sri Lanka. So these are the indications, concrete examples to say that not a single government after government are coming, promising workers many things, promising workers the world. But when they come to power, they act on the instructions of their masters. The masters are the people who are funding for the election campaign, and that is not the workers, because workers don't have that much of money. It is the microfinance companies, it is the exporting companies, it is the companies which exploit workers and earn dollars and stash away those dollars in offshore accounts so they can continue to reap profit out of the work of workers. So that is what I have to say to that.
Since you spoke about people joining trade unions, workers joining trade unions and so on, in most of the private companies, trade unions are not allowed, it's banned. And this new generation also doesn't seem to be very interested in joining trade unions or forming trade unions as per se when you consider the private sector. Where do you see that change taking place? Do you think more people will actively come and participate and be a part of trade unions, especially the women and the youth in the labor force? Do we see that change happening?
I can speak out of my experience with working with workers in the free trade zones. The fact that private companies have banned unions itself is illegal. It's like you're having a policy which is illegal inside your company. It's illegal to say you're banning trade union. When the Constitution says you have a right to form and join a trade union, when the Industrial Dispute Act says if you dismiss a worker for joining a trade union, then having a policy banning trade unions is illegal. You can't have that policy in your company. And yet, every single private company, directly or indirectly, have threatened their workers from joining trade union. So I think if this ban is lifted, if companies really want to look into the welfare of their workers, they would not only lift this illegal ban, but they would also educate the workers that if you want to join a trade union, we will support it. We will support you joining a trade union. We will bargain with the trade union for better employment condition. We will bargain with the trade union, which is you all. You all are the members of the trade union, for better, for decent wages, for living wages. The company would say that. But instead today, particularly out of my experience with working with export processing zone companies, they dismiss workers for joining trade union. So I think if this ban is lifted, if this illegal ban, it's not even a legal ban, if this illegal ban which companies tacitly maintain inside their companies is lifted, thousands of workers will join trade unions, because trade union becomes the only structure inside a company or a workplace to defend your rights. It's like a check and balance. It's like the state. When you have the executive president, you need to have the court system. You need to have the parliament. You need to have elections to have a check on this executive president. Trade unions are similar to that. When you have a company management which is looking for the profit of a company, Who is going to look after the welfare of the employees? It is the trade union. Who is going to ensure that the worker is not harassed at workplace? Who is going to ensure that if you get into an accident, the company pays fair compensation? It is the trade union. So once you lift this ban, thousands of workers will join trade unions. But in order to get there, government has to actively come and support workers from joining trade unions and protect workers and ensure that if a worker decides to join a trade union, he or she will not be dismissed from work, because that remains the single most reason why thousands of workers are not joining trade union. Today, if the state takes an active role in promoting trade unions, then thousands of workers will join a trade union. One more thing, trade unions are often seen as a bargaining agent inside the factory, but today, for instance, my trade union, the United Federation of Labour, one of the things which we are trying to do is to educate workers, take workers to the next level, and also create an international solidarity movement of the working class. So for instance, this Mayday we have put out a statement standing against the genocide of the Palestinian people, of the Palestinian working class. That is the kind of international solidarity we are trying to build through trade unions. So what is the harm in allowing trade unions to function trade unions, and as the Indian code said, trade union is an essential element in a functioning democracy, and that is what the government has banned. That is what the companies have banned illegally.
Nuwan, before we cross over to a short commercial break, I'd also like to ask you, what are your thoughts with this regard? Because often trade unions are seen as troublemakers in big organizations, because even back in the day, there is a misconception that people who are actively in trade unions will be labelled as may trade union kami to go against the rules and the policies of a company. So how do we break that barrier? And like Swasthika said, how healthy is it to have trade unions functioning in organizations?
Yeah, actually, historically, this is what happened. In 1933, the Nazi Germany, Hitler actually declared 1st of May as a holiday. The same Hitler subsequently banned all the trade unions. Likewise, in countries like Sri Lanka, first of all, now let's see the Sri Lanka Telecom. The Sri Lankan telecom profit, even during the crisis period, more than 5,000 million rupees. Who earned this profit? The workers. So workers only, due to their labor only. Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation also like that. But this profit earning enterprises, now this government, the Ranil Wickremesinghe government, is going to sell. So what is the rationale behind that? Who earned this profit? Ultimately, the same politician come forward and say there is a lack of rupees, lack of dollars. Who earn these dollars throughout the history? These workers. So this, as you said, they are trying to portray the picture. Trade unions only doing these things. They are only contributed to the collapse of economy. But the reality is otherwise. These workers only through their labor build this country, build this economy, and they only holding the burden of the economy. But however, these basically the capitalist class, they are very tactfully changing the mindset of the people, making this kind of allegation against the trade unions. But it's very clear, in this country, these 8.5 million workers only holding this economy. They are only, actually because of their labor only, the entire country running forward, not because of this group of people who are always trying to exploit these workers.
Of course, we have a lot more to talk about, but we're going to cross over to a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. This is Face to Face.
News First, Face to Face.
So the SLPP has no moral right, or basically they are lying to people if they are saying that they need power to give justice to this horrific attacks.
So I can assure you that when these latest crossover talks were happening, they're talking about 4 members in particular.
We couldn't agree with the decision to appoint Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe as the president. He opposed that, and we went to opposition.
Then bring more women into the labour force. And it's not just for women. When you bring more women into, this is a huge section of the society that's left out of the productive economic process, right?
The issue that came about was the opposition was unable to read the writing on the wall.
We just can't go and argue in front of people that, we don't want this X gentleman and we need to get a Y gentleman.
There's a greater decline, no? Then That is the situation currently, but we have to fix somewhere now.
Because when we take a loan or when any loan is being taken, we automatically go into evaluation point.
The sex absence of any knowledge with regard to sexual education. Now, those two are key pillars.
Transparent ways of showing how money is spent, we are doomed.
Even when the LTT was in operation, when there was actually a civil terrorism issue going on in the country, we didn't have these laws. Then the question is, why do we need these laws?
So this has brought down the total GDP by about 25% in dollar terms, which was around 90 billion. Now it's around hovering around 70 billion.
There are particular focus areas that I think evolve based on the binational commission.
So like the self-esteem is really, really low. Like they don't believe anymore, okay, I can do something about that. So anymore there's no any decision making about that, and very passive.
With regards to state land. So I think this will carry huge repercussions for the future.
News First, face to face.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We're in conversation with trade union activist Swasthika Arulingam and attorney Nuwan Bopage. I'd like to drift my attention to Nuwan now. We were speaking about the legal framework with regards to trade unions and the labour force. When you speak of the legal framework that is already in place for Sri Lanka with regard to protection of labour rights, can you be satisfied with what's happening?
Yeah, existing laws are concerned actually, as I said earlier, because of the influence of the Cold War era. Still we have very strong labour law. Certain rights have been from the constitution, and there are other plenty of laws actually secured by the laws. But when it comes to the implementation process, of course there are serious issues, especially the government institutions, and at the same time the private sector is concerned. Of course there are various issues as pointed out by Swasthika, but however the legal framework is concerned, still we believe it's very strong. But from throughout the history, especially after 1978, throughout these all the governments always attempting to change these laws favorable to actually employers. The recently actually they are planning to bring a one labour law instead of all these labour laws. The very objective is to actually curtail rights of the workers. Now today, the 1st of May, we know the Haymarket struggle is actually demanding 8 hours working day. Now what is the reality when it comes tomorrow? Actually, even though those days people fought for 8 hours working day, now most of the workers are compelled to demand overtime. So where we went wrong? The reality is that because at the on one side when they are giving certain rights, at the same time through other various means they are taking it back because the salary is very low. Now when you go to the monthly annual reports of all these companies, they all are very profitable. So they are very proudly say our profit this year around 50 billion, 20 million. What is the meaning of this profit? The profit is nothing but the money stolen from the workers. These workers work hard, and without paying their salaries, without paying their wages, these employer take it back, and this is a stolen money of the workers. So that's a profit. So we workers need not to celebrate that. But when we go to the workers' perspective, some workers say our company is profitable, we are very happy. But profit is not the issue. This money is stolen from workers, the exploitation is very high. That's why the Karl Marx say the exploitation is the very foundation of the capitalist system. So using this exploitation only, they accumulated this money. After accumulating this money, on other hand, that they are not giving back this money to the workers who are actually entitled for that. So therefore, the laws are concerned, actually who are the lawmakers? Lawmakers always sitting on the side of the employer who are exploiting the workers. So all the now recent past, all the laws that they are going to bring regarding the workers are always favorable to employers. So therefore, that challenge always there in front of the workers of the country.
Swasthika, I'd like to ask you now, in terms of minimum wage rate, number of working hours, job security, and so on, are we in par with the international standards?
In terms of minimum wage, recently the government has proposed and said they're going to increase the minimum wage to 21,000. Now, if you look at the cost of living of Sri Lanka, the World Health Organization has come up with a number that for a family of 4, a minimum you need 80,000 to survive. But we have a minimum wage which is 21,000 rupees. Now, what is a minimum wage? A minimum wage is actually what is the minimum amount of salary on which a worker can live in a particular month. That is the minimum wage. So if that is the concept of minimum wage, then how are we in Sri Lanka? And up until this year, the minimum wage was 16,000 rupees. Can a worker live in this country for 16,000 rupees? But when we speak about these two companies, they would say, no, there is no, workers don't feel any kind of encouragement to work. You know, we have an incentive system. So the obvious question we're asking is, let's say I fall sick today and I can't go to work for, let's say, 2 weeks. Then I can't earn my incentive. Then does that mean that I have to stay at home and starve? Does that mean that I don't have the right to be sick? I don't have the right to sleep? And thousands of workers in this country actually do not have the right to be sick in this country. That is how we treat the workers of this country who are building the economy of this country. And when we compare this to various other countries, Sri Lanka has one of the lowest minimum wages and so on. But my argument has always been, we should not compete or compare other countries in terms of who is doing the best out of the bad options. Like if there is a slavery system, we should not compare and say this country has a better slavery system than that country. Slavery is bad per se. So if you're not paying proper basic wage to your workers on which a worker can't survive that month, then no matter what other countries are doing, our country is exploiting workers, and it is on that exploitation that we are building profits of this country. And this is a question which I always ask companies. We're in a state of crisis, and companies always come and say, no, our profits are falling and so on. The question which I always ask is, you know, you're always talking about profits and you say you can't increase the salary of a worker because we don't make enough profit. So the obvious question which comes to my mind is, the material cost has increased, electricity has increased, the cost of living has increased, the cost of production has increased, but the labor cost is stagnant. As if, you know, as if the workers are not living in this country, as if the workers don't have to eat, as if the workers don't have to survive. So despite the fact that Sri Lanka is one of the lowest wages in the region, I don't want to even make that go into the argument of comparing, because you should not compare slavery. You should not compare a bad situation. Sri Lanka must pay a living wage where a worker can live in a particular month on that wage without having to break his back, without having to work overtime. A worker should be able to live in that country. So that has been our standard, that has been the standard of the United Federation of Labour, and that has been our standard.
Nuwan, I'll ask you this question now. Most of the time, the labour force or those who go into work are not aware about what sort of protection they have or what sort of rights they are entitled to. How can we increase this awareness so that one person would know, okay, these are things that I'm entitled to, these are things that by the law I am entitled to, these are rights that have to be protected from my end. How do we increase this awareness across the labour force in Sri Lanka? Do you think it's the political parties that have to do that, or is it the trade unions that have to come into play, or how should this process work?
Yeah, first of all, actually workers should know about what is the interpretation of the labour. Now, if whoever sells his labour for the survival, for wages, is a labour. So even doctors, lawyers, all these should be considered as labours. But there is an ideology, it has been divided is to the mental labour and the physical labour. It has been divided into two kind of labour, and through that certain people taking benefits out of that. At the same time, when you go to a government factory, what is a designation given to a female workers? Is sometimes they give is juki machine operator. That designation itself is a deceptive. Most of the workers are not willing to accept their labors. So from this is the very root of the issue that we are now facing. Because if you are selling your labor for your survival, for a wage, you are a labor. Then you have certain rights. First main right is you have a right to organize as a trade union. You should organize. Now in Sri Lanka, around 5% of the workers only organize as unions. So the majority is thinking, no, we need not to organize. Without organizing, how you prevent this exploitation? Now we have our friends, they are working more than 15 hours per day. But he has been paid only 2 or 3 hours wage as salary. So that's exploitation. Then it paved the way for unemployment. If one worker is doing work of 2 workers, of course, there's no vacancy for 1 worker. So it is a creation of the capitalist system. Then we should inculcate these things among the laborers. First of all, you should identify yourself as a labor, unless you can't organize. Then organizing is paramount important thing. You have to organize as workers. So you have that right from the constitution, and other laws are also there. At the same time, you have certain rights given by the constitution and other laws. So you always should know what are the rights, what are the entitlements you have. So trade unions and certain political parties, left political parties, always fighting for your rights. So, but the only problem is we were unable to organize majority of the workers in the country. As a result of that, there is a lack of knowledge and lack of organizing power, lack of bargaining power. When you go to the plantation sector, actually there was a protracted fight for more than 2 years to increase their salary for 1,000 rupees per day. So what's the meaning of 1,000 rupees under current situation? But at the same time, that sector is concerned, tea sector is concerned, these around 21 companies deriving billions of profit. So this is very unfair. This is very unfair. At the same time, apparel sector is concerned, they are contributing more than $5 billion for the economy annually. But what is their situation? They are living under very severe condition. These workers are conditioned. So where these benefits should go to them? These benefits should be distributed among them. But they are the people who are suffering a lot. Then there are some other ideological issues in the society. Our people are not working, these workers are very lazy. But that is not the reality. Actually, the current situation is majority of the workers are working more than 8 hours. That's a reality. If there is a connection between the working hours and their lifestyle, then actually most richest group of the society should be plantation workers. But they are the most streamlined, most vulnerable sector of the society. So always there's no connection, there's no rationale of these things. Therefore the workers always should learn about the history of the workers, at the same time about their rights. So trade union and political parties have a massive duty to inculcate these things among the workers.
When someone is facing an issue, let's say like employee layoffs, or whether it's workplace harassment, where can they resort to? Who should they go to? What are your opinions on that?
So when there is a layoff happening, the law is very clear. Companies are supposed to, there is a Teva Act, under which the companies are supposed to pay a certain amount of compensation to workers, but that also after the consent of the workers or with the consent of the Labour Commissioner. So if there are any issues with that, any problems with that, then directly the worker can go to the Labour Commissioner. But if there is a workplace harassment, unfortunately we don't have laws to protect workers for workplace harassment. But one of the things we can do is when an employer continues to harass a worker, the worker cannot work there. This happens a lot to women. They get harassed, they can't work there, and they automatically stop from work. In that case, it's called constructive termination, where you create a situation where the worker can't work in the place anymore. So then of course you can go to the Labour Tribunal and fight for compensation. But the issue is our code structure, our code system, and this is true across the board, is very slow.
And also one could think, how is an individual going to fight against a company?
Yes.
That is most of the time the reason why individuals don't take their issues to the court and don't resort for legal action, because they feel like that is just one of them against a big company, and then it's a big fight.
Exactly. So in the past, for instance, before the, I would say 1980s, you would, if you look at the Supreme Court judgments and so on, so you find union names on those judgments. These days you don't have those. And that is because there was a culture of workers coming together in unions. And that is exactly why we need unions in the company. That when an individual can't fight against a company, but when you join a union, it's a collective. So the union will look after in companies and factories where we have unions, we would represent the worker in the labor tribunal. The worker does not have to go to the labor tribunal or feel afraid that he or she has to face the court and the lawyers and the court structures alone, fighting it alone. So yes, of course, that's a big problem. When you don't have unions, workers have to go alone and fight their battle, and workers are completely intimidated. When it comes to women workers, there are various other intimidations also which goes on. So this is indeed a big problem for us.
Nuwan, as we're coming to the final few minutes of the program, I'd like to ask you, as a party or even as a trade union group, what are the changes you hope to make in Sri Lanka? Given the next 5 years, where do you want to make that change? Where should we start from?
Yeah, actually, first thing is there is a structural issue. As long as we maintain the structure, the so-called representative democracy, workers couldn't get anything out of that. Where there must be a procedure, there must be a process, these workers should interfere with decision making process. So there's no mechanism for that right now. Therefore, I think first of all, the most paramount important thing is there must be a structural change. During the Aragale, actually we raised this. We need a participatory democratic system that can be done only through a political change. So to do that political change, as Swasthika said, workers should unite. Because if these 8.5 million workers are really united, that is the power. So nowhere we could get that kind of power, because they are the people who running this country and running this economy. Therefore, there must be a unity among the workers. All the trade unions, all the political parties should work on that. For instance, now our party, the main trade union, actually the name is Workers' Struggle Center. So irrespective of their party, irrespective of their religion, irrespective of any other issues, there must be a center for workers' struggle. So we are struggling together irrespective of our political ideas. So there must be a unity among the workers. Number one is that. Secondly, as I said earlier, there must be a structural change. That unity should move forward for that structural change, political change. Workers should take over the power of the country. There must be a mechanism for them to participate in decision-making process. Thirdly, I think there must be a constitutional and other legal reforms as far as workers are concerned. Even though currently there are some strong laws favorable to workers, we need more laws, as Swasthika said, regarding the female workers' rights are concerned and certain other rights are concerned. We need more laws, more reforms. So we have to fight for that as well. And finally, I have to say that we need, not inside the country, internationally, there is a working forces. They are day-to-day life, they are fighting. So now, for example, Indian companies come in and take over our businesses here. But we know what is the situation in the workers in Tata company and mining sector. So they are also part of, they should also part of our struggle. So we can't isolate and fight here. We need an international solidarity with other workers, because now migrant workers issue are concerned. When you go to UK and other countries, they are suffering a lot. But we cannot have isolate workers movement. We should work with them. All the workers of the world should unite together, and actually our workers movement should also consider about that. So I think we need this kind of immediate attention of our workers unions and workforce in Sri Lanka.
Swasthika, as my last question to you, I'd like to ask you now, what are the priorities of these trade unions and these organizations with regards to how the future of the labour force of Sri Lanka should be?
There are two specific priorities. One is we are going to fight with all our effort and energy and organizing power to protect the rights which we have won over centuries, including the 8-hour workday. And I think the government should see it coming, which the government is taking away from us. So we're going to fight for that. And we're also going to fight for a future where the people who are earning the wealth of this country, will enjoy the benefits of that wealth. And as Bopage was saying, workers are working every day. People call them lazy workers. Workers are not lazy. They're working 12 hours, 16 hours. I've never seen anyone working this hard. And still, they're living in line houses. But we are going to fight for a future where the workers are going to be sitting in parliament, and they are going to be making laws, and they are going to be making policies, and they are going to be determining the future of this country. And that is what trade unions will be pledging on Mayday, and that is what we will be fighting for.
All right, thank you very much for joining us tonight, Swasthika, Arulingam, and Attorney Nuwan, Bopage. Thank you very much. Your views are indeed very much appreciated, and thank you to all of you for joining us tonight on Face to Face. We'll see you again tomorrow at the very same time with 2 more exciting and powerful guests joining us to speak about yet another important topic. Until we see you again tomorrow, good night.